mangyari dun sa pagbasa natin dun sa Chofu's attack, sorry, pasensya na dun sa workshops, but approach the text on the basis of the complexity of its story world. Because one must recognize how the author put an effort to create a story world. Talagang komplikado at interesting. Meron siya rin ginawa dun sa inversions ng timeline na pwede ko rin siya pag-usapan. Pero pwede natin siguro tignan yung kwento dun sa pasensya na hindi ko nasulat yung pangalan ng pinagkuhanan ko ng information na ito. Pero the book is about story worlds and different media. So may mga requirements para sa paglikha ng isang story world. So the first is, pwede natin tawagin na existence. So these refer to the characters of the story and the objects that have special significance in the plot. So, I suppose nabasa niyo yung Chofu's. Siguro ang dapat na mapansin dun sa umpisa pa lang, saan galing yung title na Chofu's? Na malaking bagay na nag-usap kami ng author kung nangyari ito. At everything fell into place nung pinaliwanag niya sa akin yung context ng Chofu's. It's an imaginative place from a line by Esther Pound na The Letter to a River Merchant's Wife. At parang pinaka-narrative nung tulala ito ay tungkol sa hindi nasabing pagmamahal. Sa pagitan ng dalawang tao na parang yung context din yung place is a nation setting. Kasi yung may reference siya dun sa haircut, sa paglalagay ng horse, di ba? At yung ages, the advancement of ages of the speaker and the addressee. Habang tumatanda, mas lalo niyang nare-realize kung gano'ng kalalim kung dun sa addressee. Anyway, speaking of existence, mahalagang tignan din yung bakit ko siya tinatanong na ibig sabihin, bakit kailangang malaman natin yung existence ng story world na to in terms of the reality principle that there is inside the story world. Yung reality principle kasi, kapag nakita mo halimbawa ang pin daw, i-google mo, malalaman mo na isang weapon ito na kilala sa China. Tapos, dahil nga ginamit nung story yung pin daw, it makes perfect sense na isa ito sa mga blade na gagamitin dun sa death na isasagawa dun sa story yung death by 1,000 cuts. Which, by the way, is another material reality na nakikita natin dun sa kwento. Kung iba ang storya ng mga penal methods, ng mga patriarchal systems of subjugating women na nanggaling sa ancient civilization siguro ng China at elsewhere at pinagsama-sama niya dito sa story world na ito. As such, the project of Chofu's is a quite complex endeavor kasi bukod dun sa inversion ng timeline, nagtatanong pa rin kung ano yung unspeakable crime na tinutukoy ng narrative at kung bakit ganun kalala ang parusa para dun sa unspeakable crime law. Pwede rin natin itanong dun sa ating reading ng Chofu's kung bakit sinusulat ang ganitong uri ng kwento sa ganitong panahon. Dahil nag-speculative mode ang storya tungkol sa isang make-believe na empire, diba? Na nandun lang naman talaga sa utak marahil ng author. Bakit tumubo ang ganitong uri ng kwento sa ganitong panahon? Is he or she saying na ang pagtubo ng ganitong mga kailangan pa rin, kahit na matagal na natin na-identify ang patriarchy bilang kaaway. Kasi the story is all about the existence of patriarchy and how it oppresses women. All throughout the story, nakikita mo yung burgesya na paraan ng classification ng babae. So page 1 pa lang, kung makikita ninyo, how were the women classified? Well, according to ornament, pero according din dun sa pagmeme-ari sa kanila ng order na yun. Not just the men, pero yung buong order na yun. Whether they were bought, flowered, or diba, kung fresh sila or not. Kung kilala lang pa sila sa hands, the ability to have sons, therefore just wombs, or the ability to take care of other people, or just slaves. So nakikita natin yung compartmentalization ng babae sa mundo na ito. Now, why is that still relevant for this story and in this story? So, hanggang doon na lang muna ang framing ko, kasi ayaw ko rin mga pangunahan, pero pwede niyong tignan din yung mga napansin yung physical laws na nandun sa story, na obvious marker ng pagiging fiction ito, kahit na meron siyang reality principle. Okay ba?
Like what topic said, it borders on the details, and there is a potential for empowering women by using the fantastic, the fantasy elements, but it was not picked up. But also there is a gendered experience of female character that is, the problem is presenting it as defeatist and using the gendered experience of a woman, and I guess in a way, right, being written by a man. And also the dichotomy of the idea of death and becoming a tree mother after bearing son. The idea that you die after having a son. And giving birth to a daughter by blooming, there's that biological difference that is represented in the text that I feel should be addressed, given that the difference is usually from nurture and not nature. And I was hoping that it was addressed more. Instead, the usage of fantasy is it is used basically to push forward that kind of idea, and that is a problem for me as a woman reader.
Any comment on, kasi as reader ka na ibigay mo opinion, pero on the writing?
On the writing, the formal stuff, I do have problems with it. In terms of world building. It has a precarious position between being over-detailed and being vague. And there is a problem of trying to tell so much about this world, but not being that grounded. One example is like, we don't know how exactly a daughter blooms from the tree mother. We don't know what kind of image besides its blooming. You can't tell the difference between the figurative and the literal in the text. In terms of voices between the testimonials, I also have problems with trying to differentiate the different POVs. And the different POVs could work if they didn't sound the same.
So the verbal register sounds yes.
There is an attempt, I think, there's an attempt to differentiate in terms of words, in terms of what they use, but ultimately I think the structure is kind of sonically sound the same. What else? I also have a problem with, I felt that it was lazy world building to use capitalized generic nouns to signal a fantasy world, a secondary world. So
is that a crutch, or how do you approach that?
I think it would be improved upon if it is more grounded, the story is more grounded, that you don't have to use generic terms to refer to specific things with capital letter versus capital letter.
Thank you, comment. Yes, I also got that impression din, pero the writer chose in a short story. Whereas in a novel, kasi there's a sense of finality when it's in the last page, everything is explained to you. What's good about, what's the parang liability, or yung medyo setback lang ng short stories that parang you have to kind of build the story on your own. Pero with the short story kasi, parang it's kind of open-ended, which is also the thrill of it, I think. The major aspects have already been addressed by the writer for me. Of course, I do agree na kailangan may konting fine-tuning. But yeah, yun lang.
I just want to clarify, this is a part of the longer project. So we are reading an excerpt that's supposed to stand alone. Tama ba?
No, it's the projects that I mean, what I mainly do is that I make big projects. Tapos they're interlaced sila, but the narrative isn't continued. Like everything happens in that same phase, in the same time space.
Imperial Court-ish. Pero my main issue with this one is the ending. Yung patay yung both female narratives. And then
It matters.
it matters, yes. Kasi we've read a lot of work already that identifies patriarchy as the enemy. Honestly, I read this as like handmade but China. So I was looking for something, if not subversion, at least commentary and build up. Ayoko yung patay lang sila sa dulo.
Anyone?
That's a given. So I'm thinking that, but I wouldn't want the emperor to have too many lines either. Mas maganda inert siya. Ganun siya ka-powerful, wala siya dapat gawin.
So the patriarchy is invisible naman
Yeah, it is the ground on which they stand there. It's the system. I mean, in both stories, you have the empire. Even in the second one. So may dystopian leaning si Nimruz na parang this assumption of a totalitarian state of being or life, no? Where the individual is beleaguered, really extremely beleaguered. And what you call a perverse subject is really the individual. But she is the individual. Everyone else seems to be part of the herd. Diba? She is the one who is different. Like even in the prostitute, he is the one who is different. Diba? So it's very millennial writing in a way. It's young adult writing. It's divergent, and it's those things, diba? Hunger Games, ganun siya. Nimruz is writing from his own zeitgeist, no? From his own time. And even the recourse to speculative writing, it makes him millennial. That is what everyone's trying to do. Kids, sorry, I call you kids and I was just reprimanded, and they're not kids anymore. I'm 50 years old, I just turned 50 a few days ago, I can call you kids. But maybe I'm asking myself also if because of this preponderance and this sort of like generativity in terms of speculative writing, the responsibility is higher to do something different and to read up and to come up with something new. Yun lang yun. Kasi yun ang ginagawa ng marami eh. So, ang daming echoes ni Nimruz ng mga nabasa ko na, lalo na yung, I don't know, yung Tagamundo, yung mga ganyan, yung mga, parang ginagawa ng marami na eh. So, something else, something clearer, right?
Anybody here with a contrarian opinion?
I would like to react to some of the comments made earlier by a lot of, for example, somebody said, AJ, I think the testimonies were more or less uniform, they sounded the same. No, don't agree with that. you look at the testimony of the star elder and the testimony of the matriarch. And you notice that the matriarch's testimony is full of, I am sorry, you're right. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, you're right, you're right. You do not find that in the testimony of the star elder. What does it mean? It means that this matriarch is showing herself as a woman who is subservient to that society. That is characterization which is excellent. And I would like to praise the author for doing that. And then Neil said something about the structure, that the structure of the prostitute, if you take out the elementals, would work much better. I disagree. The structures of the first story and the second story, they are more or less the same, episodic. But the second one does not work. Why? Because it does not move into a higher plane. It is like I engage in a particular kind of sex, ito, sucking, then you get a prize, one book. And then ito, you get fat, then itong prize mo. Another book. You get another customer, ito, another book. In other words, you can extend this for 1,000 different acts. And it doesn't, you do not get the sense that it has to end because this is now the high point. There's no sense of that. You get a sense of a movement going to one end, and you know that that is the right end in Churbusa. So, I mean, episodic pa rin, merong you cut, pero you know that it ends where it should end. And that is that's why I think the story is more successful. Yung second story, you have to do a lot more things. More than just taking out mga kapre, you have to
Can I engage a bit? Because I didn't say that the structure. I didn't refer to structure at all when I said that. I meant that the character and the arc of the character I think could have been sort of fleshed out better in a realistic sense rather than in a speculative sense.
That's true.
Not the actual the way that the story unfolds, because that story is different from Chufusa. May mga text, intertext siya doon. May konting poetry na hindi maganda. May konting drama, may hindi maganda. I'm sorry kung sino maganda yung mga pinabasang libro nito. Tapos mo, yun na yung kanya, happy na siya doon. He will give his body for reading such awful books. Sabi mo.
Exactly.
Disclaimer sa umpisa, he doesn't read.
Well, that's also
That's
true.
all
It's a
kahit ako
fetish.
doon, nagpapabayad ko for stuff you won't read. I get paid for
But that makes it an interesting character na. So there's something about a kind of cathexis or kind of like attachment to books, diba? Which just the physicality of the book, no, makes it an interesting character, made him an interesting character. Iba yung structure, no. So, but I think it has more potential for me for revision. That was how I took it. Meaning, I could go to town revising it. Yung Chafusa, I have to change the ending, I suppose. Kasi it's a kind of, it works.
All right. I would like to justify your final act. It's true that you decimate
You kill
the forest.
Yeah, you burn the forest.
But
Okay.
all right. But the important thing is she made a choice.
Conscious choice.
She made a choice, and even if it's the wrong choice, it's her choice. And for me, it's her personal triumph. I think there's a Beloved by Toni Morrison, a baby. She killed the baby. Why? She didn't want the baby to suffer what she suffered. I mean, of course, that's a very complicated love, no? I could not imagine doing that.
But my God, you are transported through pages of wonderful writing in Beloved. That at the end of it, you are relate and you are torn, but you understand. Here, it's sorry, speculative fiction. There's a flatness to it kasi it's actually all figure making. There's really no life in it.
Yeah, but the
Tapos
thing
gano'n
that's-
yung solution na,
Let him finish.
sorry.
but the thing is, I can't accept it because I do not see the women as women, human beings. I saw them as trees, and so I thought it's less bloody.
I guess
You cut the
still be cultural. No, but it makes it even worse if you turn with anyway.
Well, anyway, what was the decision of this protagonist? No, I give it. That's her decision.
It's
And
very
so-
hyperbolic in that sense.
It is.
Talagang,
I mean,
what a grand gesture, di
The
ba?
entire
Wouldn't it
story
have been
is
just she allowed herself to
hyperbolic.
die? Pwede na naman yun eh.
The entire
It's
story
still
is
problematic,
hyperbolic.
ah.
Can you imagine
Take out the whole forest.
this emperor telling everybody, all women, everybody? I mean, how can that be done? It's hyperbolic. Once you enter into this fantasy and you accept that world, you better accept all sorts of exaggerations. So, I think we have to accept the story in its own terms. It's a fantasy. It addresses not just something that is superficial, but that is something that is profound, and that something relates to us. So, even to our own world. And therefore, I can see that there is a strong relevance. In the story, I like the story very much. I mean, of course, you have a lot of grammatical errors. Why? I mean, these are all simple errors. Freshman English one, that should have been, wala na yan. Yung mga will, I will, I said I would, I said I will, and yung daming will. And then mga subject-verb agreement, tenses, naka-tense nga. Ano ba? Ang ganda niyang sugulat, pero bakit
Yung
yung mga
prostitute
small things, bakit, why can't you do away with all that? You should be beyond that already. Because the way I see it, your level of imagining is already up here. Yung grammar, mag-English 1 lang yan. Tapos ka na dyan. I mean, look at this.
Well, it's
again.
wonderful we're pointing that out because it's possible now for the imagination to develop independently of grammar. Because this is how I see it. Like I was transported, kahit na I was stumbling along the way because of the grammar problems. But I was there. I mean, I could ride with him, take this journey with him through this fantasy world, di ba? Kasi may imagery, may power yung imagery, nag-evoke naman.
Yeah, may I say three things about the two stories? First, this is
Ronald Sargent.
this is a reaction to the comments made by Neil a while ago. First, my question is why should we privilege realism? Right? As writers, why should realism be the privileged side for exploring issues about sexuality? So, ako, sa akin, nirespeto ko yung choice ni Nimruz na mag-speculative. Siyempre, bawat choice natin, merong mga hakibat na may consequences, na pamantayan, di ba? At minsan, tumataas, bumababa. Okay? So, yun yung tema ko, hindi yung choice ng speculative fiction. Kasi sa totoo lang, dapat lang naman, it's high time that, queer LGBTQ writers actually write speculative fiction, or rather, overtake the genre, right? Just as we have done so in other genres, di ba? Or, di ba? Dapat naman na isulong natin, ang LGBTQ speculative fiction. Kasi medyo heteronormative na rin siya, hindi ba? The way to imagine, nakaka-boring na yon. Dapat lagyan natin ng queer dimension or queer element. Number two, yung kanina, yung sa Chapusa, I think it's important to ask, ano ba talaga ang, how does poetics tie up with politics? Diba? Kasi yung kwento maganda, except for the language, no? Pero, I think makes us ask about our responsibility. It's our responsibility only to craft, but also to politics, given the times we're living in, right? Number three, binasa ko ito, and I was interested because I have written Chinese myths and legends, tales, in my poetry. And so, parang kung binasa ko siya, natuwa ako, di ba? Then, ito merong nakita ko ng katapat ko, or something, or aalay. Kaya lang, ang maganda yung kwento, pero na-disappoint ako, to be honest, dun sa ending. Patayin ba naman lahat, di ba? In short, ang point ko is, ang tinatawag ni Neil na meta-narrative writing. He did that 20 plus years ago. No? What is your responsibility when you actually appropriate myths? Especially not your own. Hindi sa'yo yan di ba? Mga Chinese yan, kami yan. Ginamit mo. Ano yung ethics nun? Di ba? Of actually appropriating myths and legends.
I use the word Orientalist because
already
that's loaded.
Yes,
you are exoticizing, you are...
Yeah, ito ang point ko. Tingin ko, binasa ko siya, of course, I question the word authentic, right? So I'm gonna use it in quotation marks. So when I read it, I didn't feel it was authentic. And so ang suggestion ko sa writer talaga, nabasa ba niya yung mga Chinese myths and tales or legends? Diba, tingin ko mas magandang basahin niya. Baka makakuha siya ng mga ideas, images, whatever, para palalimin, okay, ang engagement niya sa mundo na yan. The responsibility niya, ginamit niya yung Chinese, di ba? So, edit max it out. I mean, maximize it to its fullest potential, di ba? Kasi parang hindi ko nakita, parang chika-chika lahat. Ginamit yung merong yung story, the grove, in the grove, may ganun hodgepodge siya. Kung yung takatingin ko, kung ginamit mo yung Chapusa, Chinese, di ba? Ito yung opportunity talaga to rethink, to rewrite, and to reimagine female love in ancient China. Kasi sa totoo lang, ang alam natin talaga yung Emperor Castro, di ba? Pero research shows that there are so many
concubines
were really all over the place. So there were so many stories. And sana, bilang writer, LGBTQ, we can contribute, di ba? To that. Yung challenge para sa akin, kay Nimruz, Ang ganda-ganda Imagine mo yung Chinese world, nalagyan mo ng LGBTQ politics, nalagyan mo ng spectate, ano pang kulang? Diba? So pag nagano'n siya, at pagpapatay yung mga bae, or how do you do that? Diba parang, ang ganda,
maybe even inspired by real stories of very famous concubines or leaders in China.
Yes.
They have tried. If you go to YouTube, meron ako mga napanood, you can learn stories of how they tried to fight patriarchy.
Yes.
These concubines, some of them were very headstrong. So maybe it doesn't have to be entirely fantasy. It could be historical fantasy. It could be a mishmash of things, right?
Yeah.
So it feels more authentic. Except I wasn't bothered by that. It was already in a different play. I wasn't even...
No, pero still alam mo yun, alam mong China lang. China lang
China.
Get me? China ang China. So, ako, feeling ko, meron pang
It can be more real.
Meron still, parameters yun na tayong dapat sundin. Or dapat research, di ba? Para, saka nakatulong naman sa kanila, labas ng mas maganda yung kwento. Siguro na.
Ako naman yung idea na to unfold, at fantastic yung imagination, pero it's also a drawback kasi it's very superficial. You're not really brought into this new world for all the reasons na binanggit na rin ni Ronald. Parang topical lang, until the very end, meron pa rin mga details na ina-unfold. Yung tulad pag nanood tayo ng sci-fi movie or a fantasy movie, 5 minutes pa lang, na-world na tayo, nandun na tayo sa mundo. Hindi na tayo nagpa-question sa ganito. Dito ang daming unraveling Ang daming unraveling na by the time na nag-conclude na, or on its way to conclusion, wala nang pakialam. Parang walang puso kasi yung kwento. Kasi walang groundedness sa characters, or it's all over the place, ang daming characters dito. Clients, yung prostitute, na hindi naman hindi rin din na klase. So hindi mo ma-put yung finger mo. So sa akin walang grip. Kung hindi na required siguro to for this one, ay hindi mo mabasahin talaga dahil nilulose din yung audience eh. It also allows for a kind of embellishment. Fantasy na nga, embellish, pagtapos yung style pa ng one. The first part is episodic, acts from 5 going down to 1. Parang hindi naman nagmamatter eh. Yung acts na to, kasi it's really also linear. Yung conclusion mo, it logically comes out of Act 5. Ako ba't Act 5 yun? Yung gano'n ba? Yung sa second story naman, ang daming layering na voices na pinapasok dito, na klase, mga text, it's too postmodern na nadidilute yung gusto sabihin. Ang basic naman ng story ay what is its insight to humanity? So pag walang insight na gano'n, i-eradicate mo lahat ng kababaihan, kahit na
That's why
fantasy
you have
ito.
responsibility to the real, because the real exists in speculative writing. And that was, the politics is another way to talk about it, no? So, yun yung troubling part there, because you are trying to say something about the world using a fantasy world, diba? And you're doing that because it's a better way to understand the real. I'm not convinced it's a better way, that's what I'm saying, diba? I'm thinking that the idea of a boy who loves books for some perverse reason or other, actually, and is willing to sort of sell his body to get more books, is interesting in this world. It's so interesting in this world that to retreat into the fantasy world is for me not necessary.
So yung first part talaga, yung realistic segment, that was yun yung fantastic dito sa fantasy.
The best part.
Yun yung best part. So, parang, and then hindi mo nag-gets kung bakit nag-pull out sa realism and then moves towards the fantasy, when in fact it was working pretty well sa first part yun. So parang may a bit of a drawback na yung shifting of gears dahil lang gusto magpakita ng iba't ibang styles, ng iba't ibang text for inclusion in this.
Pwede rin naman mag-ibang text.
Pwede naman,
in this
pero-
real world, gandahan lang yung mga text.
Parang yung isang daang sulat para isang daang
Ano,
tula para
bayarin mo, have you read Possession?
lahat
Yes,
ng
Bayan.
tula pawis. Only
Yes, Bayan.
Possession,
nagtataka ko
have you read
bakit
Possession by
pinagkatuloy
Yes,
yung
Bayan?
love nila.
It's a novel, a Booker Prize-winning novel. A.S. Bayan wrote this book called Possession. It's full of poetry. The poetry is good. She invented all of it. She wrote the poetry. It's a romance of the
pa rin, no? Para mag-end ng Chinese civilization. Sorry na sorry.
Ayaw ni Ronald ko. Wala ka na trabaho bukas.
Hindi ba makaka-migrate sa ancestors ni Ronald?
Oo, yung magtatagalog sa end.
Filipino! Ay, pwedeng gano'n, no? Isa sa direction yun, no? Genocide siya kasi, yung mga trees kasi, yun yung mga babae, di ba? Pag wala ng babae, ano mangyayari sa inyo sa race nila? So, wala na. So, pwedeng panindigan. Pero,
Mas hyperbole pa.
Bonggahan yung pag hyperbolic, no? Hyperbolic siya.
Mas over the top pa.
Hyperbolic, oo. Ang pangalawa naman, medyo medyo gusto ko na mangyayari ngayon ay yung mga babae yung mag-revolt. Kasi yung mga kahoy naman talaga, di ba, nilibing sila may kasamang espada. Why not yung mga kahoy gagalaw po yung espada, batayin lahat ng lalaki?
Yeah.
So pwede gano'n.
All or nothing.
Except for LGBTQ na mga lalaki. And allies kasi gusto nila sa akin. So, isa sa mahilig ko sa Inche. I know Chinese, Chino, not Inche. Okay, so si Chin naman, I think kailangan talaga siya futuristic, no? Kasi siguro Sa tingin ko, isip ni Nimruz siguro kasi dapat organic yung prostitute ka, pero libro ng bayad sa'yo. Kasi kung realistic ito, parang, well, yun ang queer part, pero imposibleng mangyari. Kasi sa panahon na merong book sale, parang mag-ship naman ang prostitute, no? Libro ng bayad. Parang wala namang prostitute yata bumubuhay ng ganyan. So, kasi ang maganda dito, victimistic siya kasi na-establish na illegal na ang pag-print ng libro. So, kaya, naging valuable na yung libro. Kahit hindi mo binabasa, the fact na may collection ka ng libro, kasi parang antique na sila. So, yun, kala yung context na may maging profit. Kasi remember, yung pelikula na Masahista, di ba? Si Coco Martin, binayaran siya ng libro, di ba? Yung parang extra service niya, no? Libro na binigay sa kanya, yung romance novel pa. Di ba? Hindi na paknabangan, no? Doon nila pa niya pauwi, no? Pag-uwi niya, patay pa rin tatay niya, may kaibigan niya, no? So hindi pwedeng realistic, I think, no, yung prostitute. No? Pero gusto ko yung prostitute, no? Kasi, wow, sana dumami sila. Marami mo ito sa bahay. So yun na.
Hindi na ako mag-comment doon sa Choco sa mukhang
Prostitute na
yung sa prostitute na. Hindi ko alam kung ako lang o baka I'm overreading din, no, Nimruz. Pero dito parang ito na nga yung konteksto or yung mundo na ang panitikan o ang libro ay isang commodity na tapos hindi pinambayad na kaya katawan. Kasi ang tingin nga sa mga tagamundo, pag mukhang itong character ay nasa ibang plane na nga, ang tagamundo ay iba ng plane din. Hindi na nga nagbabasa, wala nang pag-value sa panitikan. In fact, kahit yung gamit ng tagamundo, ng mga elementals, mukhang merong ganun din siyang politika na gustong palitawin, no? Na yung, kailan ba natin naaalala yung ating history, yung ating kultura, pagka ito na sa isang modernong panahon, no? So in that, dun sa ganung konteksto na may super train na, may highway train na, may yung iba na yung sobrang modern na yung mundo. Iba na yung pagtingin doon sa atin, mga Tagalupa. So, nagustuhan ko din na yung prostitute. Tingin ko yung paggamit ng mga, ang ninote ko dito, yung gamit ng mga elementals, nagdagdag ng texture doon sa narrative. Except that I agree with Roland, baka kailangan lang mahusay yung transition from yung umpisa mo na napaka-real, no? Tapos nag-transition to biglang speculative mode na. Baka, yun, importante din yun doon sa, siguro sa mga bagong manunulat din at saka doon sa mga manunulat na nagtatry ng bagong form or mode, no? Yung paggamit ng form, kailangan mo talagang aralin din kung lalo kung may pinagsasabi ka na dalawang klase na forma.
Curious akong malaman, do you agree with Jaime Anden's observation about episodic character of the prostitute na parang medyo repetition na walang
static
progression?
lang siya.
Oo. Ganyan actually yung feeling ko habang binabasa mo, as ganyan lang static ko. Hindi siya nag-move. But it can work. Feeling ko lang, kailangan talaga yung handling mo nung gamit mo ng mga elements na ginamit mo doon, na inilalagay mo doon sa kwento, kung paano siya nagdadagdag nga ng texture. Kasi pwede naman talagang ganyan lang.
Ganyan lang.
Oo. Tingin ko, may mga mababasa kang kwento.
Dapat may change in consciousness somewhere. Or something. May movement pa rin.
I'm curious to know what Joanna thinks about Choco's.
Hello. Hello, magandang umaga. Yung, ako nag-agree naman ako sa lahat kasi I'm a very agreeable person. So, hindi ako ideal reader ng ganitong mga teksto kasi nakakabasa lang ako ng speculative fiction sa workshop. Yung talagang hindi ito yung gusto kong basahin. No? So, kailangan ako talagang pilitin, di ba, para basahin. At sa workshop, dyan ako napipilitan. So, in fact, kung sa deliberations, hindi ko siya talaga nilagay sa listahan ko ng mga gusto ko. Kasi, hindi ako naniniwala na nawo-workshop ang speculative fiction. Kasi ako, nilirespeto ko yung kanyang world. No? So, ano ba yung basihan pag wino-workshop ang speculative fiction? Kung speculative na siya. So, kasi para sa akin, ang workshop method, para talaga siya sa realistic na mga na panitikan. No? So, medyo, pag nagbabasa ako ng works na ina-announce naman yan, na speculative siya, so medyo nagre-relax ako dun sa workshop mode na naghahanap ng ano bang dito, aayusin, gano'n. Kasi siguro may, para sa akin,
anything goes pa? Anything goes?
Kasi nga hindi ako ang ideal reader. Hindi ako nagsusulat, inspected, tapos hindi ko alam yung mga ano ba yung hinahanap. Bukod sa, of course, language or katulad nung sabi ni Honorio na pwede namang nice to meet you. Hindi naman kailangan talagang yung plot niya traditional na may umaandar, na may nangyayari. Pwede naman talaga siyang wala nangyayari lang, di ba? So paano mo i-workshop? So para sa akin problematic yung idea. Pero ang isang bagay na, okay, gusto ko naman yung register, yung languaging, hindi ng grammar, just the way the writer inhabited this world that he built dun sa Chofusa. Carry, gano'n. Kumbaga sa na-internalize niya yung word na yun, so carry, no? So, ang hindi carry para sa akin, bukod sa binanggit na ni Ronald na siya, China, so, syempre, inauthentic yung China, parang super, kasi Miss China, di ba? Di ako naman si Miss Lesbian, no? So, dito ako medyo nailang, no? Na, yung pinabasa ko sa siya, dun sa, hindi ko alam kung sino sumulat, sabi ko, uy, lesbian story, ganyan. Pero, nakita ko dun sa dulo, hindi siya lesbian story. Bakit? Galit sa babae. Di ba? Pinatay niya lahat. So, na-mention na kanina, bakit naman pinatay lahat ito? Yung talagang genocide, di ba? So, galit sa babae ito, ano? Laso na babae. Patayin namin kasi bakla ito. Sorry, intense, di ba? So, pero, of course, joke lang yun. Hindi naman kayo galit sa mga lesbiana.
No, pero it's something to ponder,
It's something to
why is
think
it so
about.
easy for a gay writer to write a story where all the women get killed off?
Yeah. Pero may nice kanina kasi, di ba, nasa kanya, meron siya mga stories na butch, ganyan, butch siya, tapos pinapatay niya yung butch.
Things like that. And then a flower bloomed and a baby came out of that tree. Okay, this was an interesting tree. So how do I write it? It sounds like a story. So I
Was he humping the tree in your dream?
No, he was
Hugging
that.
Because I dreamed of that. Someone was humping a tree.
And then so I was thinking, okay, how do I write that? Because somebody told me that it sounds like a story, better write it down. And I was thinking, okay, women who become trees and then they bear children. All right. So how do I set that up? I can't set that up in the real world. And I was rereading A River Merchant's Wife. So I was, okay, this could be a love story. If I write a love story about a man who fell in love with a tree, it's weird. So I came up with all of these elements. I was watching a lot of Musha films during that time. So okay, gets. So yeah, I mean, admittedly, I was appropriating a lot of things. But am I really? I mean, we belong the same. I mean, China film is very close studies.
Especially now.
Especially now. Ayun. So I wrote it that way, and then the image of the man embracing the tree got lost in the middle of it because a character came out, Liu Xing, who didn't say anything. She wasn't talking to me. She was just saying, okay. She was just showing me that she was going to be executed. And they asked her why. Why? Because they burned this tree. Why did you burn this? Why did you burn this forest? She wasn't saying anything. So the reason for burning the trees, it was something that I came up with because she wasn't telling me the reason. And And then I had to convince myself that Lu Xing was in love with this person because only that violence can only spring from love. I was thinking, okay. But that's the problem. She wasn't talking to me, and she said, and when I wrote the story as this, she just nodded her head and nothing. Parang baliw na ako. So that was it. So it was me convincing her that no, you did this out of love, because you could only do something as bad as that because of that love.
Have you ever been in love?
Yeah.
So you can imagine killing off a whole tribe?
Oh, no.
May tanong ako. May fearlessness pa rin siya. A while ago, while he's a stalk, ang magandang natutunan ko sa kanya ay nakatulong sa kanya ang pag-alis niya sa Pilipinas. Kasi she was free from all the censoring. She was free from all the judgment about her stories and where it might lead. Ang gusto kong i-emphasize sa kanya, kasi feeling ko parang napabayaan ko siya as my sort of ward, di ba? Hindi ba dapat din natin i-celebrate yung fearlessness ng story, yung ambition nito, the fact that you're writing about this imaginative Chinese.
It's very inventive, I would say, but you're right, it's quite a pastiche of influences. And probably while we encourage you to keep doing that, it makes you very millennial. Diba? Everything is recycled now and everything is appropriated. Probably to be, if you really want to seriously work on this story again, then I would do more research and try to discipline some of that fearlessness and into something, because you don't have to invent too much pala, it turns out. There were really concubines who were doing it. The story of this, that's the love story here. It's just not between a man and a woman, it's between women. Diba? Which ends up in the destruction of women. It's a really profound...
At may truth pa rin naman na women are treated as trees. There's a certain truth to that. Na elsewhere, di ba? Napaka-privilege natin, nandito tayo sa university. But beyond these walls, di ba? Women are treated as trees. Na hanggang anak lang, hanggang bahay lang.
The giving tree.
The giving tree. So, I guess yun yung halaga.
I would have wanted to see more of that.
Yeah.
The tree that gives and gives and gives and gives, diba?
Hanggang sa magsawa. In fact, baka hindi niya kailangang sunugin. Mamamatay ng pusa.
Forests can die it, like without killing them, they can die on their own.
No, they don't.
They don't
They
die.
stay, but they only bloom once, twice. Pinakamarami na yung 3 times.
Come up with a different kind of forest. Yung forest na...
Trees can speak to one another.
Yeah.
Communications.
They have crown trees, diba? Interesting things about forests.
Because she had a dream near the end. She had a dream about the end, and the friend said, "Don't let anyone have her." She interpreted it that way, and then when she
She's a little crazy.
could be because she's not a good person. Usually isn't. When she was speaking to the slave at the flat pallet, she said that on an ordinary day, would even look at her because she knew she was a.
So you didn't do a good enough job making us see her as an anti-hero. Because we saw her as persecuted. That's the opposite. And if you have an anti-hero, an unlikable character, we're all entitled to have abominable characters, right? There has to be a good reason. And you're making a kind of statement about a particular reality by having an unlikable or this abominable character. But Prostitute is interesting. Because you thought of something that can happen now. I'm sorry, no, John, you can have a connoisseur of books naman, hindi naman siya magpapatol sa any book sale book.
Siya, any book lang yung character.
Pero yun nga, but the ano nga is, if you frame it realistically, it's someone who will only do it for the right book.
CCP ka ng PG, for example.
Okay, first edition type.
I think someone for that.
You're willing, no?
Yeah.
The whole set.
The whole set.
Value ko kayo.
ONS lang.
Recording, you know.
I write about are all constrained individuals.